Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is Saturday. We have our first speaker, Jessica Adams. Jessica is a very well-known astrologer, and she's a media astrologer, but she also teach and write a lot. Her book, The Secret Language of Stars and Tarot, is going to be published at Christmas, so stay alert. And Jessica has an enormous experience and in astrology, and we are all waiting to hear what is going to tell us. And her talk is about the alchemy of news prediction. Jessica.
Thanks, Isabella. Hello, everyone. Hi, Julia. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Colin, Guillermo, Gerard, Ross, lots of people here. Some people are still drifting in, but let's make a start. So what we're going to look at today is wrong predictions, right predictions, how you get there, the role that science plays, the role that quantum mechanics plays, and the observer effect. We're going to look at why it's a good idea to make two predictions, not one, to give yourself confirmation. We're also going to look at how you can use the Smith-Waite Tarot deck with astrology. It was a deck created by two astrologers in 1909. We're going to look at synchronicity and the work of Geoffrey Cornelius and Maggie Hyde on astrology as divination, and a few other things beside. I can take questions as we go. Very happy to do that. But let's begin with a wrong prediction. Okay. Now, back in 2016, The Guardian rang me up and they said, who's going to win the US election? Will it be Donald Trump or will it be Hillary Clinton? Well, this is why intention, attitude, and state of mind is so important when you make a news prediction. Because my attitude at the time was, I don't have time to do this, okay? I'm very busy. I'm not hugely motivated to talk to The Guardian, who were very anti-astrology at the time. And in any case, Hillary's going to win. Any idiot can see that. Who's going to vote for Donald Trump in a month of Sundays? But I went to astro.com, and I looked at the data, as so many astrologers did. And there was Hillary Clinton's chart rated DD, dirty data. So I should never have used it, but I used it. I spent about 5 minutes on it. And I eyeballed Donald Trump's chart and I ignored the fine print beneath it that said, this is from a birth certificate posted by Donald Trump on the internet. And at the end of the day, I just said to The Guardian, well, Jupiter's in Libra, Hillary's going to win because Jupiter's about equality for women. And lo and behold, Hillary Clinton did win, 2.9 million more votes than Donald Trump. But I got it completely wrong. And that was very interesting for me because it was a big lesson about intention, focus, concentration, and purpose. The technique is almost less important than how you feel at the time of making a prediction, whether it's for yourself, for a client, for a friend, or predicting the news before it happens. The technique, I think, is only important in as much as you believe in it. And you're convinced by it, you trust it, because the whole point about astrology is that you're walking into astrology world whenever you make a prediction. And in order to do that, you have to absolutely trust the technique that you're using. I used no technique when The Guardian asked me to predict that. Later on, I would use a technique to predict other political events that I had worked much harder on. But I thought it was very interesting that my state of mind was reflected in what happened. Jupiter in Libra was right. Women came through. She got 2.9 million more yes ticks on the ballot than Donald Trump did. But I didn't put up an inauguration chart, and I should have done. And in any case, the moment that you see a DD rating for any politician, you just don't go there. You avoid it. So we learn as much from our mistakes with prediction as we do from getting it right. I'm just having a look at some of your questions here from my website. The other thing about what people are asking me about, how much does belief in astrology play a part in getting a good result or an accurate result? This is a really important point because so many astrologers that I know, and you may be among them, are believers. You are interested in, or you accept Christianity, Buddhism, spiritualism, Wicca, and all the rest. Now, the expert on all of this is Nicholas Campion, and this is his book, Astrology and Popular Religion in the Modern West, Prophecy, Cosmology, and the New Age Movement. And a few years ago at another conference, Nicholas interviewed a number of astrologers, and I was among them, about our religious background and religious belief, if any. As it says in the book, I told Nick that I'd been raised a Roman Catholic, gone to convent school, and ended up being sympathetic towards Tibetan Buddhism. Not that I practice it. And all the astrologers that he interviewed tended towards being believers rather than non-believers. So that tells you a bit about the psychology of people who do astrology and also why it works, because the whole point of astrology from a scientific point of view is that we're walking into a parallel universe. We're walking into one world of many worlds. The theory of quantum mechanics first defined by Hugh Everett III in the 1950s. When we do astrology, when we predict the future, we are doing something that shouldn't happen, okay? That defies rational expectation and thought, that drives scientists nuts. There's still a lot of people out there skeptical of astrology who call it a pseudoscience. But the reality is that we're closer to the truth of the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics than most other people ever are, because we spend so much time measuring what we think is reality. And according to the Copenhagen interpretation, it is the measuring that's the thing. Everything is everywhere, all the time, all over the place, until you observe it, until you measure it, until you judge it and assess it and size it up. And if there's anything that astrologers do, it's measuring. In fact, our entire way of looking at reality is based on geometrical angles, numbers, 360 divided by 12. 12 into 360 gives us the constellations, which are their own numerical language. So most people don't bother with that kind of thinking about the real world. Most people don't want to predict the future, don't even believe it's possible. Astrologers who believe it is possible, it's a good idea and it should be done, like me, do things like predict a virus, and they do it a year before it happens to give people ample warning, and they give dates, okay? Most of the public don't even go there, okay? And yet they're still measuring reality. Every day they wake up, you know, to something like this, the alarm clock. They wake up to the alarm clock and the calendar. They wake up in a place with a particular longitude and latitude, so they know where they are. Right now, you're in Bedfordshire, if you're in Bedfordshire at the conference, and it's 9:08 on Saturday morning. And I'm here in Hobart, Tasmania, and it's 7:08 at night. We're all measuring and we're all getting our reality. And that's what most of the public does. What astrologers do that's really peculiar is they move beyond the usual time and date measurements into an idea of time as a circular construct, and the idea that time can reveal the future once we check the past. Once we know the past and we see repeated themes like the return of the North Node and South Node to Taurus and Scorpio, or the return of Saturn or whatever else is going on, we have an idea about what to expect in the future. Now that's really odd, but there's nothing wrong with that according to the many worlds theory of quantum. So astrology is not a pseudoscience at all. It's actually a part of a controversial but increasingly widely accepted explanation for why the core of reality is the way that it is. You could call it the Goldilocks theory of reality, or the quantum jackpot theory of reality. So Paul Davies is the man to talk to about that, or to read. Paul Davies is a physicist who has excellent ideas about this many worlds theory, and the idea that our world, our planet, is Goldilocks. It's just right. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's like the porridge in Three Bears and the Goldilocks. It's just right for life to survive and thrive. Now, the odds of that happening in this vast galaxy are extraordinary. They're well against, but we cracked the cosmic jackpot. And we've ended up in one of trillions and trillions of worlds where it just is this way. We got lucky. but we're in a kind of a freak universe. And it's the same with astrology. When predictions come true, you've walked into a world where you believe, you trust, you accept, you know it's going to work, and lo and behold, it works. But if anybody thinks that there's an objective truth out there, or an objective reality or universe which is there to be discovered by the astrologer with the right method, they're on a hiding to nowhere. All you're really doing when you're doing what I do, which is predict the future, is walking into one world among many where it works. The trick is you can't fool yourself. You have to trust what you're doing, and you have to know the technique. Now, talking about a failed prediction about Hillary Clinton, I got it right about George W. Bush and John Kerry, but I got it right with a cookbook. Not an astrology cookbook, but a diet cookbook. Once again, the media were on the phone, wanted to know who was going to win. Once again, I was really busy. I didn't really have time for it. To organise a prediction would have meant 20 American horoscopes in Nicholas Campion's Book of World Horoscopes. It would have meant trying to correct John Kerry's chart, which had a C Rodden rating. It would have meant in short time I didn't have. So I turned to bibliomancy. Bibliomancy is the art of getting a book, preferably a Bible if you've got one to hand, but any big chunky book will do. Literally all I had was South Beach Diet Cookbook, okay? But I took it seriously. This is where technique does matter, because you have to believe it for it to work. I took it seriously. I followed the rules. I concentrated. I set an intention. I asked the South Beach Diet Cookbook who would win that election in 2004, even though John Kerry was the clear favourite, okay? Who would win? And I got a recipe called Crab Royale. So if you're an astrologer, immediately you go, thank God, Crab Royale, Cancer Leo, Cancer Leo. I looked at both charts, such as they were, even though Kerry had C-rated data. And it was quite clear that only one of these two men had a Cancer Leo combination. And it was George W. Bush. And I called it with a recipe and it worked. He won. I moved into astrology world. Okay. More on this many worlds theory. The other one that you'll hear about is monkeys writing Shakespeare. If you believe in the fact that there are trillions of universes, that we split into trillions of versions of ourselves every time we make a quantum measurement, which is what Hugh Everett believed in, then one of those universes out there is going to produce monkeys in a room with a lot of typewriters, and by sod's law, they will produce Shakespeare. By sod's law, by the odds involved, they will produce Shakespeare. So I don't mean to insult the astrologers out there who make predictions or insult astrology, but the fact is, when it goes right and our jaws are on the floor, we are in one of many, many trillions of worlds where it just so happens that it happened, okay? Now, some quotes for you. Brian Clegg is a science writer, and he wrote a book called Dice World, published by Icon in 2013. He talked about the Copenhagen interpretation of reality at the quantum level. There is no point worrying about where a particle is or what it is doing. It's just a probabilistic mess. Nothing really exists until the measurement is made. So everything is everywhere, all the time, all over the place, until you measure it, until you look, until you observe it. And if you never ever look and you never ever observe, it goes on being everywhere, all the time, all over the place. This is an extraordinary description of Neptune, really. And as Neptune goes through Pisces, as astrologers, that's something that we're looking at. How are we to understand the reality that we're walking into, and why have we walked into it? Why have you and I decided to walk into a world where COVID-19 exists? What is going on? Why have you and I walked into a world where the climate emergency exists? Why are we here? Why are we there? And what does astrology have to do with that when we look at our horoscope? Now, astrology is divination. Okay, it's not anything other than an alchemy between you, the transits, your chart, the charts of the people around you, the transits that they're going through. This is the chemical experiment. And this is really at the heart of what Carl Jung knew about astrology. Maggie Hyde and Jeffrey Cornelius produced this book years ago now, with Chris Webster. It's called Astrology for Beginners, but it's a fantastic Bible for professionals, and I'm always going back to it. And their work on Jung really set the tone for this kind of idea. Here's an illustration from the book about you being part of the whole experiment. Jung found he could not separate himself from his astrological tests. He was invoked, he was embedded, he was the observer who was part of the outcome. And that way of thinking about astrology is terribly important for the work that you do, because before you even check what the horoscope is telling you, you really need to check your state of mind, your approach, your attitude, how you feel about doing the prediction, how you feel about the client, if you have a client, and so on. Because one way or another, what these kinds of astrology predictions prove is that you cannot take yourself out of the equation. Now, predicting the news twice is a good way of giving yourself that confidence and that trust in the process that you can walk into astrology world repeatedly and get it right. And so as I began developing, they call it mundane astrology, but there's nothing mundane about it. You know, it's the most exciting kind of astrology there is. As I began developing that approach, I realized that 2 bites at the cherry was better than 1. And if I could put something in writing a year before it happened, if I could do it twice and come up with 2 dates that were relevant to what I was seeing, and if it would come to pass, then that was a prediction, and it was a prediction that I could trust. Brexit was as long ago as the 5th of July 2015. So this is a year before people even begin talking about a referendum to leave the European Union. 5th of July 2015, published on my website in big capitals: England leaves the European Union and Scotland leaves England. Now, Scotland is yet to leave England, but in this astrology world that I've entered into, I believe that will happen. Uranus also dominates the charts for England and Scotland, ran the prediction. England will eventually leave the European Union. Scotland will ultimately leave England. Europe is breaking apart, and this is the start. Then in 2016, I repeated the prediction, because finally we have a date for the referendum. David Cameron, who's then the Prime Minister, gives us an election date, and as astrologers, we suddenly have a chart to work with. So I wrote, if the result is goodbye EU in June 2016, the revolution will only gain in heat, energy and power, and it's going to bring in Scotland headed for Indie status. Now, this is based on all the charts that we have for Scotland and all the charts that we have for the United Kingdom, but it's also based on the tarot. And I'll talk more about that in the second half of this talk after we've had a break. But what you're seeing here is not so much the validity of one technique over another. It's really an astrologer who's absolutely convinced that this is the way. The state of mind is there. The approach is there. The measuring is being done. The astrologer has become part of the experiment. The virus. Now, back in 2019, a virus was the last thing on my mind or anybody else's mind, really. But I was working for some of the time in Melbourne in an office that was occupied by a professor who had achieved her master's degree in epidemiology, or the study of epidemics. So as I was writing about 2020, I was surrounded by books on all kinds of viruses, from the Spanish flu right back to the Black Death. And I began looking at horoscopes and noticing signatures for not just what you'd expect, Virgo transits, Pisces transits, or opposite Virgo transits, but transits that were affecting an entire generation of people born in the 1960s, where some of you here will qualify, with Uranus and Pluto in Virgo, the sign of the body, the sign of health, the sign of hospitals, doctors, injections, vaccinations, and the rest. Now, astrology is sociology as much as it is everything else. And events don't just come down and land like a Monty Python foot from heaven. You know, you don't just get a virus coming out of nowhere. Viruses are about people. And what I was seeing in the transits mutable sign transits, the like of which we'd never seen since AIDS, okay, HIV, was that every single person born with Uranus and Pluto in Virgo was going to be swept up in squares, oppositions, T-squares, and some of them grand crosses. And that because everybody born in the 60s had that configuration, it would be an unusually high number of people on the planet, okay? And then you go back to history, because astrology is about history as much as it's about sociology, and you begin to see that it was there during the Black Death, it was there during the Spanish flu, it was there when William Lilly was predicting the plague in London in the 1660s, and here we go again. And so this is what I wrote on the 28th of March 2019. ITV followed this prediction up with an interview on YouTube, and it went on the cover of the Daily Mail. Between Monday, January 6th and Monday, January 13th, 2020, there will be a critical change in the balance of power between the United States, China, and Europe. Now, this is based on national charts, okay? It will also involve New Zealand, either on questions of trade or as a major non-NATO ally. We, the people, need to track this before it even comes to pass to make sure the stakes are kept as low as possible. Post-millennium bugs, hackers, and viruses. As an astrologer, I always deal with American readers who type day, month, and year dates in reverse order to the British and Australian way. Yet no matter how you key in the date of the eclipse on the 10th of January 2020, you end up with what looks like a memorable code. I am going to leave this with you. This is not my area, but I need to mention it. What actually happened on January 20th, 2020 was that China reported the first death from what they were calling the Wuhan virus. Now, this has been quoted on the internet widely, and a Chinese channel in YouTube set up a Chinese translation of the prediction with a picture of my head with a sort of virus poking out of it. But really, it's important to take it in context, because you have to be true to the astrology here. I said hackers and bugs as well as viruses on January 10, 2020. And time doesn't allow for me to go into that and the role that Russia played in a major computer issue on that date. But we can't separate any of this from the virus itself. The whole point of that prediction was to talk about China and the balance of power. Okay. The next prediction was made on November 11, 2019. So we're getting closer to January 2020, but there's still no sign of the virus in the news. The prediction is, where is the chaos in your life on Sunday the 8th and Monday the 9th of March? This period is chaotic because we have a full moon in Virgo and the sun's conjunction to Neptune. In fact, you can circle these dates in your diary now, because we're going to see computer and human viruses, and we're going to see shipping affected by wave after wave of rain and flooding. This was 2 days shy of the World Health Organization declaring the virus a pandemic. And at that point, the shipping issue was cruise liners infecting places like Tasmania, where I'm talking to you now, as the virus was carried by tourists on boats. So the astrology was lining up with the tarot, and it was talking about the future in a way that proves to me that I'd walked into astrology world, okay? Now, synchronicity in the tarot is something that's worth looking at. This is the deck that I use, the Smith-Waite Tarot deck. You can see it here. It's basically, in many editions, this is a centennial edition with the original colouring by Pamela Collins-Smith. Pamela Collins-Smith was a member of the Golden Dawn. She was inducted by W.B. Yeats, who was an astrologer as well and a tarot reader, as well as becoming the future Nobel Prize winner. And the cards are interesting because they work very nicely on a synchronicity level with the solar chart and also the natal chart. They work very well with national charts as well. So if you're looking at the United Kingdom, you're looking at Scotland or Wales or Ireland, the tarot can give you a nicely coded version of what's going on in the chart. And again, it's very much about convincing yourself, okay, proving to yourself, validating it for yourself, making 2 predictions, not 1, date stamping them, being as specific as you can, you know, within the language of astrology. And also, I think, understanding why you're doing it. This is a very important reason why people get predictions right or wrong. If you don't think that prediction is morally and ethically correct, you shouldn't be doing it. If you doubt your ability to get it right, you shouldn't be doing it. If you feel nervous about doing it, you shouldn't be doing it. You need to have a clear foundation from which to operate as a predictive astrologer. While I was doing the predictions about the virus in Melbourne, in this room full of books about epidemics and pandemics, I also had the work of William Lilly next to me. Now, William Lilly predicted the plague in London. He also predicted the Great Fire of London, and he was a plague astrologer. William Lilly worked under the belief that God was guiding his hand, thus Christian astrology, and he had no moral dilemma at all about predicting what would come. What Lilly was doing was hard determinism. He was predicting outcomes with particularly striking woodcut illustrations years before they would come to pass. I have one that shows coffins surrounded by rats. Now that's extraordinary because it would be 200 years before scientists made the connection between rats, fleas, and the plague. Lilly had seen it, probably in one of his nighttime visions, and commissioned an illustrator, we don't know who, to bring it to life. Nobody knew what caused the plague when Lilly was a plague astrologer. Ring a Ring of Roses suggests that they thought it was in the air. It was in the fleas on the rats. And that's the vision that Lilly commissioned into a woodcut. His view was that he was there to help, that he was there to minimise or reduce the problem. In fact, if the Mayor of London had taken Lilly seriously, the Great Fire of London would have been put out at Pudding Lane where it started. The flames would have come about as the woodcut showed, but there would have been some sort of system in London to deal with the fire. As it happened, his visions came true. In fact, as we all know, he was accused of having contributed to starting it. When you're working predictively and you're looking at dangerous situations, life-threatening situations, difficult situations, it is your responsibility as an astrologer to clang the alarm bell so that things are kept as minimal as they can be. That's why I said in 2019, we, the people, need to watch this to make sure the stakes are kept as low as possible. The fact is, if they'd shut down all the flights from China after the first man died on the date that was given, the 10th of January 2020, then obviously COVID-19 would have been contained within China and not become the pandemic it was by March 2020, a few months later. The whole point of astrology is to say, you can have a virus or you can have a pandemic. Forewarned is forearmed. If you know it's coming and you're seeing evidence that's coming to pass, then you need to roll up your sleeves and get serious about it. And if more than one astrologer is talking to you about this, you know, Andre Barbeau saw the pandemic coming, then be open enough to accept that somehow you're in astrology world and you need to be proactive about it. You can have a great fire of London or you can have a small fire of London. You will still have a fire, but it's up to you to use your presence in astrology world to try and minimise the damage. So there's this issue here about, do you believe in it? Do you trust it? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's ethical, moral? That is the very basis upon which you need to proceed if you're going to do this stuff. Okay, so we'll have a 10-minute break. Feel free to go and get a cup of coffee, have a cigarette, ring up a friend. But if you do feel like participating in a live synchronicity astrology tarot experiment in the second half, please go to my website, which is jessicaadams.com. And I'd like you to draw a tarot card that answers this question. What is the most important story in your life at the moment? Okay. What is the most important story in your life at the moment as October 2021 ends, November 2021 comes in? And how can you best manage it? Make the most of it or manage it? That's the question. You'll frame it in your own words. But if you come back with a tarot card after visiting jessicaadams.com, at about 40 minutes past, I'll look at the chat and I'll go through your solar chart with you, as well as the tarot card that you pulled, and we'll see live how it actually works when you're inhabiting astrology world. So I'll see you back here. Thank you. Okay, that's great. So, all right, Julia's got the Lovers and Nina's got the Hermit. So we've got Sue with the Emperor. So Lovers, Hermit and Emperor. Thank you. I'll just find those cards. Got the Hermit, the Lovers, looking for the Emperor. These are all major arcana cards. So it's typical of the tarot that it turns up major arcana cards as we move into major transits, and we're about to go into this whopping Scorpio stellium in November, preceding the South Node in Scorpio, which moves in January 2022 and is there throughout 2022 and 2023. So on one level, I'm not surprised that you three have all got major arcana cards, the Lovers, the Hermit and the Emperor. You can do this. I mean, we're not possibly going to have time to go through everybody. I'm going to try, but we'll see how we go. But if I don't, you can still do this at home. Okay, so when you've drawn your card, find it on my website and slide it onto your desktop. There's the Lovers for Julia. There's the Hermit for Nina. And there is the Emperor for Sue. Okay, just as an example, slide it onto your desktop, okay, and sit with it, because you can do this. In fact, you should do this yourself. And look at your natal chart to see how it's tallying with the card, but also look at your solar chart as well, your sun sign chart based on your regular zodiac sign, because for that kind of confidence and conviction that you need to step into astrology world, to measure that reality and know that it's real, really, really real. The more validation that you have, the more confirmation that you have, better it's going to work for you. That's really where this is at. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Anna Margareta was... she needs to move away from the moldy flat and buy to get the money to buy. She got the Moon first, then focused better and got the Four of Wands. Now it's really interesting. This is a very good example of multiple reality choice. Now, it's not that kind of LA thing of manifesting or the law of attraction or any of that stuff. It's actually science. This is the book that I was talking about earlier, Dice World, Science and Life in a Random Universe by Brian Clegg. It's actually science. What you're doing is, every time you do this stuff, you're measuring. You're getting out some sort of yardstick. You're doing what most people don't do beyond the alarm clock in the morning. Okay, the average punter out there in Bedfordshire on this Saturday morning is not doing this stuff. Okay, they're measuring reality with the alarm clock. They're looking at it and going, well, I think I'll go back to bed. I think I'll make myself a nice egg and bacon sandwich. They're not doing what we're doing, which is right at the beating heart of what quantum is all about. Okay, a few cups there. So we've got the Ace of Cups, the Six of Coins, the Wheel of Fortune, Temperance, the Queen of Swords, the Knight of Cups, the Queen of Cups, the Two of Wands. What I will say to all the people with cups is that you're actually drawing the suit associated with Scorpio, Cancer and Pisces. That's the way the Golden Dawn defined cups. It's about feelings and emotions, okay? And we are moving into Scorpio season. So we're about to see the Sun, the new moon, Mercury and Mars all transit Scorpio in November 2021. And they're going to aspect anything in your horoscope in Cancer, Pisces and Scorpio, okay? So cups are all about fluids. They're about tears, they're about blood, they're about perspiration, they're about other bodily fluids that I won't mention on this recording. But effectively, cups are about relationships, human relationships of the most human variety. And for those of you who are pulling cups cards, do have a look at your chart, not just your natal chart, but also your sun sign chart, because you're going to see stories that are reflected in the tarot cards that you've been pulling. Somebody's just born, Lisa's just pulled the Ace of Cups, just like Francesca, the Ace of Cups. So that sometimes happens too. Excuse me, when you get a group session like this and there's about 35 people here, you find that people draw the same tarot cards. And sometimes I have known this happen as well. There's a really good reason for that. They either already know each other and are in a situation together, or they are drawn together after the lecture. That can happen too, you know. The Scorpio weather that we're going into is all about the 8th house of the natal chart, which Scorpio rules. It is about death, sex, and money. Okay, so it is about the personal side of financial relationships, whether it's with your husband or wife, your lover, your ex, whether it's with a family member. It's all about the house, the apartment, or the money channeled through the intensely personal side of relationships. Somebody else, we've got 2 people that have drawn the 3 of Cups straight after each other. Jenny's just drawn the Lovers. That's the second time that card's drawn up. Okay, so I'll just move on to the very first 3 that we got. Okay, so Julia drew the Lovers. Okay, now this is in astrology and tarot a symbol of Scorpio writ large. Okay, here we have a man and a woman stark naked as the day is long. It's about sex. You can't get past the sex with this card. You can see the serpent in the corner. There are issues here about what's a sin and what's not a sin. There's a religious component to it. The other key thing about this card, I'm sorry about all the flashing, the flaring, but you can see the sun at the top. So the sun is about to move into Scorpio. So without exposing your personal life on the internet, Julia, especially in Australia, we have to say that this is about a choice. Do we get closer together? Do we move further apart? Should I stay or should I go? It's like that Cure song, Let's Go to Bed. I won't say it if you don't say it first. Let's go to bed. It's on that level. You're not going to be able to get away with sex with this card one way or another. And the sun is the clue at the top. Watch the transit of the sun through Scorpio and the aspects it makes to your natal chart and to your solar chart as well, because that will give you the timing. Okay, the Hermit. Completely different kettle of fish, isn't it? Now, the Hermit is about being alone, and being alone is about the 12th house. The 12th house in the natural house system is ruled by Pisces and Neptune. And as we go through this Scorpio weather in November, we're going to see trines to Neptune in Pisces by all the Scorpio factors passing through. So this is very likely to aspect your natal chart. Using the natural house system, it's about the 12th. The 12th is about going inward to find faith, spirit, and soul. It's about the inner search alone. It's about therapy. It's about religion, Buddhism, the tarot, spirituality. It's exactly what you can see in the card. And there's something about this card which is about the inner space and not the outer world. So have a look at your horoscope and see where you can locate Neptune in the 12th. And consider this to be a very effective use of the Northern Hemisphere winter, okay? A very effective and powerful use of it. It's time to do that. The Emperor. Okay, so this is a nice coded astrology card. I'm sure you can see Aries the ram on the throne. So here we have, and there's Aries, or possibly Capricorn, the goat, at the top of the throne. It really depends on how you see it, because it's your reading. You've just walked into astrology world, okay? But Capricorn is, of course, the boss, the CEO, the father, the grandfather, the power player at the top of your profession or your workspace. And everything about your chart, to me, suggests that we're going to see Scorpio picking up Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn picking up Scorpio, or transiting aspects between Scorpio and Capricorn. But we're also seeing, don't forget, Chiron is in Aries in November, and that may also be connecting with your horoscope. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I thank you to everybody for doing this experiment with me. I'm not going to be able to do justice to your readings in 15 minutes. There's more than 15 cards here. But what I will say is that if you do have time to put the card on your desktop or on your telephone and really sit with it, you'll start to see how one is mirroring the other. The astrology is mirroring the tarot. The sun sign chart, Nina's asked, what's the difference? The sun sign chart is basically the solar chart puts your sun sign on the cusp of the 12th and the first house. You then use the equal house system and whole sign houses to count round the chart. If you need to see an explanation of that, you can look on my website, but it's the way that sun sign astrologers ply their trade. It's how we make predictions every week, every day, every month, every year for your sun sign. It's really a technique or a method, a house system that was popularized for the media, by the media during the war. In particular, it took off, and it's as valid as anything else. It is a kind of public weather forecasting of your life. The private internal weather forecasting is done by the natal chart. So in a way, it's like somebody saying to you, it's going to be cold today, it's going to be rainy or sunny. That's the public solar chart. But the temperature of your room, the heating or the air conditioning in your bedroom, that's your natal chart. That's the personal side of it. Okay. Here's another technique that you can try. It's very interesting. You will need Solarfast software, or you will need a lot of patience with astro.com. Okay. What is worth trying in terms of talking about you being the observer and embedded in the experiment is an alternative perspective on your past. Now, the alternative perspective on your past involves you recalculating your chart using any of the 30 plus house systems on Solarfast software. I first tried this experiment in 2008. Britain was going through the global financial crisis. I had not been paid by two very famous magazines for about 9 months, okay? My tax bill arrived, and then a whole lot of other bills arrived as well. And I realized that I was living my chart, okay? I was using the Placidus house system, which gave me some horrendous oppositions between the 2nd and the 8th house. And those transits at the time was savage. So I was in this sort of typical situation that a lot of astrologers find themselves in. I was dealing with the reality of having things I didn't want, okay, which was the global financial crisis and the reluctance of magazines to pay anybody. At the same time that the chart was validating and confirming what I was experiencing. There seemed to be no way out. It was a Saturn transit. It was going on and on and on. It was retrograding. And all I could really do was moan about it at astrology conferences, which I did vociferously. And then I think I reached a point one day where maybe it was quantum mechanics, maybe it was something else, but I just realized none of this is real. You know, none of it's real. We all have to select a reality, or we wouldn't be alive. But you selected a reality, a world among many worlds, which you really don't like. So why don't you try and recast your chart and get out of it? Now, when I do this at talks, people just sort of screech like they're a mandrake uprooted from the ground. It's absolute heresy to say that you should change your house system. But it's just, there are no lines in the sky, you know, and science tells us, feel free, why not? So anyway, long story short, I ran the Second World War through over 30 house systems. I had nothing better to do. I had no money, nobody paid me. So I sat down and I ran the Second World War, D-Day, Pearl Harbor, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, first day of the war, 3rd of September 1939, everything through over 30 house systems on Solarfast until I found something that worked. And it worked so well that it worked every single time. It worked in specific ways with no vagueness. And it did what it said on the packet. And that house system really surprised me because I'd never used it before. It was the equal house, whole sign based Aries first house cusp system, which I call the natural house system. You can read more about it on my website if you're curious about it. And after satisfying myself that it was explaining the past in a specific and accurate way, I then turned that house system on my own chart. And to my absolute amazement and joy, I ended up with Jupiter in the 2nd house. So I lost all my second and eighth house oppositions, all my difficult financial configurations. I lost all those horrendous transits of Saturn over the second, eighth house oppositions. And suddenly I woke up with Jupiter in Taurus. But the question is, did I believe it? Was I convinced by it? Or was I kidding myself again? Was I going to have another Hillary Clinton disaster, you know? And so I went right through all my memories of money and possessions and property in the preceding 40 years or so, right back to childhood. And I realised that, believe it or not, I had always been a Jupiter in the second house person. As a child, I had been notorious in the family for entering competitions and winning prizes. As a teenager, I won scholarships to university that were worth a lot of money. Okay, let's just say a lot of money. And for all my gloom and doom about never being paid by anybody in magazine land and having this huge tax bill to pay, I realised that actually, according to this house system, I could validate the fact that I'd had a pretty good Jupiter in the second house past. So that became my horoscope. That became my horoscope from that moment forward. And here's the kicker. I checked my bank account that night. I checked it as soon as everybody in London went to the bank, okay, just to see. Every single penny that I was owed was in my bank account, okay? Thousands and thousands of pounds appeared in my bank account. And that's a true story. That's a true story. So, and people talk to you about reality and horoscopes and house systems and all the rest of it. If you have a life, okay, particularly at the moment, which is so tough for people, if you have a life that you think could be better, happier, more fulfilling, and you feel stuck, okay, with your astrology, you feel almost trapped by your astrology, then try running it through 30 different house systems. And I would actually begin with the natural house system. If you want to do it now and you can't wait, you can order one at my website, okay, for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Or you can try it free on astro.com. You just need to find the house system that puts Aries on the first house cusp. You then have to convince yourself, which is the hard part, okay? You have to go back through your own history and make sure that you are satisfied that this is the house system you're going to work with. And then you walk into that world. You step forward into that world. You're now measuring your reality using a different measuring device, a different way of dividing up the circle into 12 houses, perhaps different aspects, different orbs for different aspects. But you're doing quantum. And with any luck, you'll end up with a house system that gives you what you want. If you can prove to yourself that it's valid and that it's always been valid, if you go back to important dates in your life, like marriages or moving house or careers or children being born, and you find that it tallies up with the house system that you're trying, then live with it, walk into it, put it on like a coat or a jacket for the week and see where it takes you. But the trick is, as I said, is convincing yourself. Okay, I'm going to end with a general tarot reading for everybody who's here, because you've been very patient. Oh, I've just dropped half of them on the floor. That's quantum. They're not meant to be there. They're not meant to be in the deck. Okay, I'm going to read for you and find a card for this session. I'm going to ask, because it's very important to frame the question the right way, what is the most that you can get out of this session? All of you who are here and all of you who'll be watching it in the future on Zoom, because I believe that the Zoom recording is going to be sold to the Americans who aren't out of bed yet. What's the most that you're going to get out of this? And how does it tally with the astrology now? Okay, death. Right, okay, so there's Scorpio for you. The transits that we're experiencing at the moment on Saturday, the 30th of October, 2021, are the Sun moving through Scorpio for the first time in 12 months, and the imminent arrival of Mars in Scorpio on the 1st of November. We're also moving towards the Mercury transit of Scorpio and a new moon in Scorpio. So death in the tarot is seldom death in the tarot. Okay, that's the first thing to say about this card. Sasha Fenton, who's a very good tarot writer, this is her book, interprets death as what you would expect as an astrologer. It's a transition. It's the death of the old and the birth of the new. You can see the sun in the background of this card rising. That's the sun in Scorpio. So what we're seeing here is the end of an old way of life connected to Scorpio things: death, sex, and money. Okay. For lots of you, it's going to be money, because so many people were born with the outer planets in Scorpio. And also the Uranus in Taurus transit, don't forget, is coming from the other side, opposing. So for plenty of people here, this is going to be about the end of a way of financial life and an intensely personal level. There are the children there, okay? So this may be about children and how they inherit your wealth or don't inherit your wealth. It's something that we all have to think about, you know. These are odd times that we're living in, and Scorpio matters are going to come up. What we are going to see with this Scorpio transit in November 2021 is the setup for the next 2 years, because the South Node in Scorpio will transit your chart for about 2 years, starting in January 2022. So if you haven't yet examined all things Scorpio and 8th house in your horoscope, now might be a good time to do that. Pamela Coleman-Smith, who created this card, created a deck which would see people through 2 world wars and, in fact, the Spanish flu. This card, this deck, went on sale in 1910, okay, and about 8 years later, the Spanish flu was a reality. So she was creating images for the ages about transition and recovery, rebirth, new beginnings after the old. And I don't know if you can see that flag, how closely you can see that flag, but it's there you are, it's a better picture of it. But honestly, that's not a million miles away from a coronavirus ball, is it? The center of that flag. So there's a message here in Scorpio weather about having gone through 2020 and 2021 and the reality of COVID and everything that it's changed in our lives, and understanding that we are now going into the South Node in Scorpio. And we have to go through this period of transition and rebirth and new beginnings once we've dealt with the reality of what's there. Okay, that's the world that we've all just walked into. We're now nearly at the end of the session. So I'm sorry I couldn't get around to everybody. Gerard, I'm sorry I couldn't do the High Priestess for you, but very quickly have a look at your 9th house, okay? Jenny, the Lovers, have a look at your 7th house. The Empress, Ingrid, have a look at your 4th house. Okay, the 3 of Cups, Maura and Izzy, have a look at your 11th house. If you need to know more about all this, I will be writing a little bit more on my website on a feature called Alchemy, which is tied to this session. So feel free to ask questions there. And you can also bail me up on Twitter if you have more questions. But thank you very much for coming along. I know that it's really early in the morning over there in Bedfordshire. Thank you, Annette. Thank you for your thank you. And enjoy the rest of the conference. There are some amazing talks coming up. And I can't wait to join you in the audience for some of those. So take care, and I'll see you later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much.